Hello everybody, I'm back with another McFarlane Toys Batmobile review, and I'm really excited because this is the final of the movie Batmobiles to be released. And I must admit, this one kind of came out of the blue because this wasn't really foregrounded. I wasn't aware that this was going to be dropping, and then suddenly there it was. So I'm going to dive straight into this by taking a look at the packaging. And none of the Batmobiles have been particularly consistent because they are different lengths and sizes, so the packaging tends to be a little bit all over the place, but it is obviously oversized. It is essentially a big, large, oblong box, and it has the standard DC Multiverse branding, which is essentially just nothingness. It's a void, a black void. But we do have this glossy image here of the vehicle itself, which looks really cool. And we have the Batman logo as well. Now, of course, this is a gold label series release, so we do have the gold foil tab there as well. Now, if we flip it and look at the side panels, we can see other images of the vehicle here. This is more of an artistic rendering, which looks pretty nice, although very similar to what we see on the front of the packaging. And then if we look at the reverse, we have that same image, but this time slightly enlarged. And we have a little insert of the feature of the vehicle, which is essentially being able to put your Batman figure inside. And spoilers, that's basically all there is to this vehicle. And then finally, at one end of the packaging, we have this flap here, which is really very, very nicely done. We have the Batman logo, and it looks like Jim Lee artwork doing a rendering of Pattison's Batman. This is really, really nice. This is the kind of stuff I like to see, and I wish they did this a little bit more in the DC Multiverse line. So, the good news is that the vehicle is all in one piece. No assembly is required. On previous Batmobiles, we've had to attach fins and things like that, and that obviously always creates the risk of having unseemly joins, but this is pretty seamless for the most part. However, the thing that really struck me with this when I got it out of the packaging is just how lightweight it is, and actually how bare bones it is. There's really not an awful lot in the way of decoration, paint apps, or really anything going on. Now, it is quite nicely sculpted, and we'll take a closer look at some of those bits and pieces in a moment, but just on first impressions from a distance, it's a bit bland, it's a very matte plastic, and overall just a little bit dull. Now, I don't want to mislead you and do the vehicle a disservice, because there are some elements which are really very nicely sculpted, and we can see a lot of detail being drawn out, which is really fun. Particularly on the bonnet, the front of the car, we see various rivets and grooves and bits and pieces there, which is quite nice. And most notably towards the rear of the vehicle, where we see the exposed engine, we can see the use of different plastics here as well to add a little bit more depth. So we have black plastic, grey plastic, and we have some red plastic to indicate lighting on the vehicle. Overall, the sculpting is actually really detailed. There's a lot going on here, which is really, really nice. But where this falls down, in my opinion, is the lack of paint apps to really capitalize on what is a great sculpt. To really draw this out and make this feel more lifelike, because, you know, a simple wash over here would make this look a bit more realistic. As it is, it's incredibly plasticky. It feels very toyetic. It feels very basic. It feels unfinished, to be honest with you. And that is a bit underwhelming and quite disappointing, especially for a vehicle at this price point. Surely it's not asking too much for a wash over some of this detailing. We see a little bit more effort around the wheel arch of the vehicle, where there's a splash of paint here, silver paint, to indicate a bit of wear and tear on the vehicle, and that's it though. Nothing on the tires, nothing anywhere else. It's just a splash here, which is almost incongruous really against the rest of the vehicle. It's like there's just a tiny amount of detail, and it's just really, I would like to have seen a lot more of this throughout the whole vehicle, really. Just washes and little touches here and there to just really bring it to life. Otherwise, these details seem a little bit wasted, very plastic-like, and just very underwhelming. The other major disappointment for me is that we don't have any lights on this vehicle, and we can see where they would have been. Wherever we see a red strip, for example, that could have been a light bulb, right? And that could have lit the vehicle up, and that would have added value for money with this vehicle. And we've seen it on previous Batmobiles. We saw it with both Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. So really disappointing that we didn't see that carried over here. This feels like a retrograde step and diminishes the effect of the vehicle overall. Unfortunately, things don't get much better when we take a look inside the cockpit of the vehicle. To me, these Batmobiles very much feel like they step right out of the late 80s or the early 90s in terms of the limited decor and the heavy reliance on transfer stickers. Thank God we have those, because we'd have no detailing here otherwise. As you can see, nothing's really sculpted in, except for the detail that on the passenger side of the seat, we can see this sort of engine bits and pieces sticking through, which is kind of cool. I like that they've got that detail in there, but you can see just how flat and plastic this is. It doesn't really have any real sense of depth. It's very, very toyetic. It's very basic, and there's absolutely no paint washes whatsoever. And this is just really very underwhelming. Okay, so how does this work with our Robert Pattison Batman figure? Well, you may remember that he had a sort of rubber cape that's just as well because it is flexible enough to allow him to be seated in the vehicle. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, I've got to be honest. There only is one working door on this vehicle as well. But I am pleased to say that if you persevere, you can get him into a comfortable seated position and it looks natural enough and there isn't much resistance from that cape there at all, which is very pleasing. I wouldn't say that visibility is particularly great, and that does tend to be a bit of a theme with these Batmobiles, is that you can't usually see Batman actually in the cockpit, but I think probably the Pattison Batman fares the best because we have that sort of empty side window. There's just no plastic, there's no glass here whatsoever, so you can see straight through and see him that way. And also the windscreen is pretty large actually, so you can see him seated in there if you're at a low position. And sadly, that's all there is to it, really. So overall, I'm going to give this vehicle 3 stars. It's not terrible. I'm really glad to finally own this and complete my movie-themed Batmobiles. That's absolutely fantastic. This was never something I really dreamed of before, not in the 7-inch scale. So I am really delighted to be able to round out my collection. That is lovely. However, it does feel a little bit like a rushed job. As I said, this wasn't really foregrounded, particularly it wasn't really announced earlier that I was aware of, so it just seems to drop out of nowhere, which suggests it was kind of rushed out without much thought or fanfare. And the effort feels quite low here, like there's no lights, there's no sounds, there's not really a lot of love and care gone into the overall presentation in terms of paint apps, etc. This feels like a bit of a shell of something that could be developed into something quite special, actually, but it hasn't been capitalized on at all, and that is a real shame. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.